Hello and welcome to the Social Recruiting Show. I'm Katrina, Collier, social recruiting trainer and speaker. I'm of course joined by my gorgeous co-host Audra Knight, employer branding genius nerd, who has a very interesting t-shirt on, but she's only showing you a job post. So we'll have to find out what the rest is later. Today, super excited to have actually quite a challenging little topic from the show. We have Sophie Theen, who is head of HR and talent at 11FS. And also an Australian, so that just makes me so excited.
I know.
Ever.
I know.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, Sophie. I'm excited about this topic, too. It's definitely going to be an interesting one. But before we start, would you mind just giving us a little background on how you got into HR and recruiting?
Yeah. So I used to be, so I graduated, I studied automotive engineering, so I graduated as an automotive engineer, worked in engineering for about 8 months. This is a story I usually tell people. I wasn't a fully fledged engineer, unfortunately. I realized I was never going to change the world doing that. So one step at a time because of that. And then I went out for a couple of events. Being a graduate, you needed to make connection and things like that. That's what your lecturers tell you. Then right immediately after that, I met one of these startups. He was a director and he was like, oh, why don't you come and join me and actually recruit engineers instead? So I was thinking, why not? And then I just started doing that, immersed myself in the same engineering world because I kind of thought, well, this is an easy way out, doing something fun, something I already enjoy doing. And my full day, it's sort of it was a hobby turned into a job kind of thing. And that's how I started off in recruitment. And then because of that, I led a few recruitment projects over at IBM when they took over the RPO rollout or implementations for General Motors, both Asia Pac. And then they flew me over to the UK. I'm now based in London for the exact same project when we rolled out Germany and Europe at that time. So I pretty much did the same job for 6 different countries at that time in the span of 4 years. Yeah. With IBM.
Giving you shit about your Australian accent. He wants you to say project again.
I think he likes it though.
Yeah, I'm one of the only Australians who says projects, not projects.
Projects, yeah.
I always laugh. It's always when I always very rudely say they're fresh off the boat, and it's they're still saying projects, not projects. And at some point you'll switch because you just get sick of giving crap on the Brits. Yeah.
All the time.
It's like yogurt and yogurt. Nah.
No, it's the same thing. Why are we even having that conversation? In fact, I still say banana because that's how I learned it when I was younger, because I was studying in Singapore. So I say banana in an international school. Until today, I cannot get that out of my head. You just have to sue me.
Oh, it's brilliant. So you didn't come over for the weather? I thought that's why most people came to London.
No, it wasn't. But it was a really good project, to be honest. I mean, Germany was literally the hub of all things automotive at that time. I was thinking this was going to be a dream come true. So I came over, spent some time in Germany, spent some time in UK, Ireland, did all of that until the client decided that they were... it was more of a global decision at that time. Mary Barra joined General Motors as a CEO at that time, and she wanted to, like every CEO does, you come in, you make drastic changes, and it was cut, all costs were gone. So no more RPO, they made everything internal. So you were either going to be changed over as an internal recruiter, which I hated. I didn't even I felt like, there's too much rigidity around it because the whole reason of doing RPO is because you still have the freedom and autonomy to try and change some of the processes because your job is supposed to make it look better and help them recruit better in a better way. But as soon as you get immersed into the whole internal, I kind of feel like that's really not what I wanted to do. Then I was really lucky. I know it's that layers and layers and layers of that approval that just doesn't sit well with me. I mean, I haven't stopped moving since we had this conversation for 4 minutes now. So you can tell, if you tell me that there's a lengthy process to follow, I can't do that. I wasn't programmed that. That's what I always tell myself.
You're going to disappear at some point. You won't be here in the hour. Talking to the wall, which we do think is very cool, by the way. I'm just not sure it'll be as chatty as you are. That could be a problem.
So then so I did that for a while, and then I called it quits because it just wasn't the right thing for me to do anymore. Again, it was a passion hobby turned into a career. So therefore I was kind of feeling like if I were to do this right, I was always going to do this right for the right reasons and the right feeling as well. I need to be enjoying like my work.
Yeah.
So then I was really lucky. I started talking to Revolut. So Revolut was a challenger bank that was born and bred in the UK, London-based. They are actually one of the biggest challengers bank at the moment. I left them just right after we closed Series D. So just right before we turned unicorn after the valuation came back. Yeah. I took them through hypergrowth because that was what I thoroughly enjoy doing. Going into fintech didn't scare me at all because there's so many people in that space, and the support system is remarkable. Even if you don't know about fintech, they are going to teach you because that's what they do all day long. They talk about it, and that was the easiest way for you to learn, right? So I did that for about 8 to 9 months. I was the head of HR, and I brought them from 70 to 350. So that was all recruiting at the same time. That was the first time I actually got immersed into how do we make the culture better? What does HR mean and all of that? So trying to reinvent the wheel, but also at the same time telling myself, hey, don't be too scared because you didn't, study HR, didn't come from a HR background. We can all do this together. And from there, you kind of learn like what teamwork truly means because you can't do it all alone. Yeah. And sometimes you just kind of have to swallow that ego and know that, you know what, you're one person. Someone else is going to be better than you at doing something else. So we did that.
What Steve is saying, if you would mind telling Sam what that means, it's like telling the CIPD what that means.
I know.
That helps, yeah. It's quite cool. Can I just say, completely digressing, did you happen to hire the marketing person for Revolut? Because the way they handled that shit tweet yesterday, which was literally about shit, was so good. Like,
yes. So, I missed this.
I'll share it with you later. But oh my god, they got sent a thing. You can actually post shit to people. It's organic stuff. So you can use like seriously. Yeah. It was how they handled it and handled the comments. Wow.
Do you know why? Like I said, everything, and that's what I learned the most. My biggest takeaway from Revolut was you can do anything that you set your head to, and you can do anything that you want to achieve, right? It's about finding a different approach, a different strategy, but you'll find a way to get there. So what we did at Revolut was we didn't hire people from a marketing background to do marketing. The best way to expand ourselves at that point, because we had very little customer base. We also couldn't really figure out what the, like growing pains of a startup, you couldn't really figure out what your bigger vision was. It usually starts with a founder-led vision, right? So because of that, we were like, no, we started off as travel card because that was the smartest thing to do. It was because of what Nikolai, who's the CEO, was going through, and therefore he, gave birth to this product with our CTO. Then because of that, then we realized, let's do this a bit differently. We're a startup. We're here to take risks. If it doesn't work, we'll know. But you've got to start somewhere, right? So then the entire marketing team was built of PR people. That's why we're so good at handling backlash. You can talk about, exactly. So you can talk about our culture, whether or not we're known as a really aggressive, rigorous culture that drives you to the ground because you have to work so hard. There's no such thing as work-life balance. It's about goals. But hey, it works for the company. Yeah, it really does. But that's it.
Well, why did you make that decision? Why did you make that decision to hire PR people instead of marketing?
Because it makes sense. We were speaking the same language. We were moving so fast. We were moving faster than anyone else in the same challenger bank space. So what do we then need? Someone who speaks the exact same language. Because in a startup, there's no such thing as a risk of having a bad hire. Your only risk is having a hire who cannot prove themselves to be great. So we've got a very short amount of time to hire someone great, but also giving them the tools and the support system to make them even better than their first version when they walked into the company. So everybody had that self-fulfilling thing that they want to learn. Yep, it is really
but
like
you just randomly laugh. You know it's a comment, right? Yeah.
I know. But it's the same. It is really like a marriage, and that's how I run HR and culture and startups after that, because I finally truly understand it's not about not finding the right fit for your hiring managers and going through, conversations over conversations. It's because, hey, you're not having a real and honest conversation. I don't need an engineer who's just going to be behind the laptop. We talk about unconscious bias. We talk about discrimination. We talk about all of that thing. but how much of it is true and what is it that you're doing about it? We don't talk about that enough, right? It's the hard conversation. So when it was a dead set, straight up conversation when we were just like, what do we do about marketing? Do we need a marketing team? We don't need one. We've got customer base. We need to retain them, keep them happy. How do we do that? And then Revolut started off as a word of mouth company who does that better than PR.
Yeah.
So we've got one vision and we go for it. We make mistakes along the way, like everybody does, but we own it and then we continue on and carry on.
So how long were you with them? 8 months.
Yeah, 9 months. Yeah.
Gosh.
And then I came. Yeah.
Where you are now.
Yes.
And so, how different is it for you?
Very, 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 very different. So
better backdrops.
Yes, better backdrops. Also because it's a WeWork space. I just picked the prettiest room. It is very, very different on a cultural sense, but also I've suddenly felt like this was a perfect timing, a perfect fit, and a perfect role for me to go into because I've learned all the things that I shouldn't be doing. You know how I was saying, like when you were rapidly growing, you were going through all these growing pains, right? You were making mistakes. So normally if you set out to do 10 things, you're going to fail at 6, but then only achieve 4. But if that doesn't kill you, it actually makes you stronger because you learn what not to do in the next 6 things, right? So then I've moved on to a place like this where, God, the support system is remarkable. It's a bunch of just people who get it. They get why we're doing things a certain way. They get why we want to reinvent the wheel in hiring and things like that. Ever so often you go into a company, especially a startup, there's always a one founder vision and then you go with one founder vision. It was a founder-led company. Yeah. But because we've got 4 co-founders, it kind of makes it hard for one person to dictate over the other 3. So therefore, because of that, they're naturally, when they started the company, very cohesive. They understood that. They understood collaboration. So when I came in, it was very typical. Every HR person gets asked by a startup person, a startup leader. They would always say, we've got these problems with our people. Can you come and help us fix it? But when I joined the company, there was nothing for me to fix. It was beautifully crafted. It was just, you've got these mini bits of problems like everywhere else. You've got pockets of problems, but then they're fixable. So then my only focus was, how do we grow faster? How do we maintain the culture? And how do we make it better? So, I mean, yes, sometimes I work around the clock, but it's a good feeling to have because it's very, very rewarding. So if you ask me again, in terms of environment, complete flip side of the other side of the coin.
Yeah, interesting what you're saying about having a group starting up rather than one person. Yeah, I get that.
Sometimes you would think that, you know how like sometimes a group will go into a meeting room and you go, that was an hour not well spent because we got nothing out of it. Because you've got so many cooks in the kitchen, right? Everybody has an input. But then for some reason, these 4 just work.
Great.
That's awesome.
How big is the company now, and what's your plan for next year?
Yeah, so we are 98 strong as of Monday morning. So I do that on a weekly basis because that's the only day.
How many started on Monday?
No, so we're 98 strong.
I want to know how many started this week.
4 people started on Monday.
Oh wow!
Yeah, 4 people started, but it was completely different in Revolut. Like we had 250 over people starting in 6 months. My onboarding manager almost drowned. That was all she was doing. Her full-time job was onboarding. And when I joined the company, we were 30. So 6 months in, we're about like 3 times now, but we're only like growing faster and faster.
But it sounds like in a much more comfortable way that you will onboard people properly and you'll keep them better and really, because I think you can go too fast, right?
Correct. Yeah. You can't go through too fast and then you kind of forget because you're so busy like everything else, right? You're so busy, you forget about, I forgot about having these touch points with these people. And then, they end up having a really bad onboarding experience, but you didn't really mean to. It's just the whole excuse of being absolutely flat out.
Yeah.
But
they turn up on the Monday morning, you're like, who are you?
I know. I sent you an offer 4 days ago, but okay, thank you for showing up.
That's quite worrying. That's quite worrying. So how we ended up here, I almost feel like I have to read it out, which I'm cheating a little bit. That's funny, you know. But you were asked to speak at an ethnicity summit, and that made you like really, really uncomfortable, and obviously ponder the impact of unconscious bias, and then also like how does that impact, and how does that impact in hiring and that sort of a thing. So tell us more about your thinking about wanting to talk about this as well.
Yeah. So we were talking about this earlier about the fact that I wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Like, was it? We were using the example saying that, you know, it's like poverty. How much when do you stop talking about it and actually do something about it, right? So in a way, I wasn't sure. Like, I was 50-50 about how I felt when I was being approached that way to speak at an event like this. It was more around, what am I promoting? I understand the intention behind it, but would my execution after, when I was presenting, is going to actually bring in the right impact that the organizers were looking for? And you never really know, especially in such a controversial conversation and environment, you're never really sure what you're saying is going to be well received or not. In a way, I'm probably one of those individuals that are quite comfortable in controversy. And I'm quite comfortable being brutally honest as well.
That's why Australian, to be fair. We are just so blunt. Yeah,
we are. But have you seen the Dutch?
Oh, the Israelis.
They are slicing through. Yes, the Israelis.
I did think we were blunt, like kind of left, but I still think we're quite direct.
So I was that was what I was saying. I was feeling 50-50 about it. I wasn't sure if it was the right environment for me to go like point blank, really blunt about how this is not a propaganda. This is about a bunch of people with the same collective mind that is using this as a safe space to talk about things, because this is what happens, right? You've got all these hit and miss. I'm going to say this out loud. Like, you've got hit and miss in women in tech, because I'm in tech. I'm a woman. I can't change that. And then you go to events where they're talking about like really soft stuff, where you're just listening about the same old things. It's probably something your colleague was telling you about, like over lunch. And then you go to some really empowering events and you listen to the speakers and you go, hey, you know what? Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't do that. So that's a really good effect, right? It's a positive one. And then sometimes some of the events are quite dry, where they're just focusing on recognizing the impact, recognizing the risk. It's like doing a bloody risk analysis. I'm sorry, I probably should have said that. Like I said, we're really blunt.
Oh, no. You can explain to your heart's content. Yeah.
but that's it as well, because
I actually haven't sworn yet. It'll happen at some point.
You're talking about it all day long, but what are you really doing about it, right?
What are you achieving?
And then I get extremely frustrated as well sometimes, because if I get invited to a speaking event and they are talking about, hey, we want to invite you to talk about the challenges in the startup, but try to make it as mild as possible. But I go, why the hell am I on stage lying to your faces that this is the most magical unicorn place in the world, because the startup is supposed to give you freedom to wear like furry shoes to work, because no one's gonna point at your dress code, right? But it's not about the freedom and autonomy. The freedom and autonomy also comes with like huge responsibilities. Yeah, absolutely. Like, your neck is on the line all the time, because you are a single point of failure and also a single point of success.
You can't hide.
You can't. So then I kind of go, why are we doing this? And that's why sometimes I struggle. Like, where do I find a safe space to actually rant about these kind of things? Like, let's all get together and talk about how it's going to create an adverse effect if we don't do it with the right intentions, and and then also at the same time execute it in the right way. That was how we stemmed the conversation.
It's funny when you said about the women in tech thing. I'm just thinking, like, back in the agency days, because it's less so on the in-house recruitment side, it's really male dominated, right? And I never felt like a woman in recruitment or a woman in the motor trade. I worked in the motor trade for like 7 years. I never once felt like, and I always worked with boys, and I never once thought, oh, I'm a female in. It's funny, isn't it? Well, we do that in tech a lot.
We do that in tech. So just going back to the point, like, I spent 4.5 years, 5 years in my first gig in engineering. I studied there. I was doing mechanical and then all male, right? Yeah. But you didn't feel like you were different. Sometimes, yes, because they don't invite you and I can't play football. So yes, I feel left out a little bit. But that was really about it. It was more of like a lifestyle choice rather than like the professionalism that you're going to, the passion and the skills that you're going to learn. So, but right now, because there's so much emphasis on it, that you're a woman in tech, woman in tech, woman in tech. So like, I prefer to call myself like a person in tech, because I'm in tech because I love it. I stumbled into it, but then I love it. I love it with my dying breath right at the moment. And I do it because I love doing what I do. But then does it make it different if I was a woman or a man? And then that goes back to the point, it's not going to make a difference if whatever color I was going to be.
As well. So are you born and bred in Australia then?
I was born in Australia and then spent the first chunk of my life in Singapore, and then moved back to Australia when I was 16.
And your parents are from, I'm like digging in all the private questions going on here. But are they Chinese descent or Singapore descent, or where are
Chinese and Malaysian.
Right. But I mean, some of what you're saying resonates with me, but I think that's almost the Australian thinking. I think the luck of growing up there, particularly your older years, you don't really feel like you're a female or whatever. Everyone's just kind of treated much more equal than I think perhaps they are here. I don't know.
I do kind of agree. Like when I was growing up in Australia, it was more like, hey, you're not different. And plus I was Asian, right? So like you're with a bunch of white people. We don't have enough Asians in Australia. We don't even have enough people in Australia to start with. But yeah,
and so many of us leave.
But I think it was that, because of the way we were growing up in that culture, you unconsciously feel like you are already embedded into anything you walk into, be it a room filled with different kind of people, or walking into a world that was filled with different kind of people. You just never really go and pinpoint how different you are or find a problem. You know how like sometimes people go, the more you talk about it, you become the problem as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I had a funny situation when I ran my very first Disrupt HR, and I had somebody of Indian descent speaking and didn't even think about it, right? It was just, these were the people I knew, these were the speakers I booked, and he grandstanded for a minute. And he said, like, look around this room, and I managed to get 60 people there. I was so excited that there were 60 people there. It was my first event. I'd put like and it was just my mini little network of people, right? I hadn't really, thought about it. They were HR people. And he goes, and look around this room, there are 3 brown people in this room. And I'm just like, oh my God, who the hell do you think you are? Like, you never ran this past me that you were going to grandstand like this and blah, blah, blah. But what was really interesting was one of those brown people came up to me afterwards and said, that made me feel so incredibly uncomfortable. I can't believe he did that. How dare he single me out like that? As far as I'm concerned, I'm British. And I think this is where it gets even murkier, because there's someone calling you because, checkbox, you're Chinese, I can book you for the ethnicity stuff. Or do you just feel like an Australian and don't feel like anything?
Exactly. And you know what makes me really cringe? When someone actually has to have a checkbox and say, like, can you fill in your ethnicity, or like, what are you? Are you basically singling me out or putting me in a box where I'm a minority? Like, that's what they do in America, isn't it? Yes, in a way it is supposed to cope with the bias. But then the more you talk about it and then you put these kind of tools in place as part of the process, you're singling people out.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just for compliance, so it's not even a choice. We have to do that, which I'm not saying it's right or wrong. We just have no choice.
I mean, I because ethnic minorities have had a go, more than just this particular person have had a go, I've had to be a lot more careful to make sure I cover it off. But I hate it. I feel uncomfortable. I just like to book the best speakers. I don't want to sit there. I mean, I always very much aim for the 50-50 male-female. But other than that, I don't want to think about it. I just want to go, oh, that's a great mix. Look at that. But that's been half consult and bring it on. That's all I want to think about,
Exactly. So so when you're doing HR metrics, one of the ones that makes me feel the most uncomfortable is finding the pink and the blue. Like, what is the percentage of our pink and blue, like women and men in the company? And if you like bring up the numbers of the pink, then you're doing a really good job in making sure that you're bridging the the gender gap. I mean, it's already a main struggle in tech. What we really need to do is, so this is what I always say, right? You need to bridge the gap, like, and start young, bridge that generation gap, rather than, you've got limited amount of women out there already.
Yeah.
So how are you? So most companies are fighting for the exact same woman, and we all know what's going to happen eventually. You stake up the prices, and then you overpay people. You disrupt the economy. You disrupt the market, and then some poor recruiters are going to sit there thinking, I can never find someone because my managers and my company cannot afford to hire anybody. So then you can't hit your male and female target. Like, you're setting people up for failure. Why?
I don't know. There's the other side as well. You know, they talk about the glass ceiling and women on the board and stuff. I just had this feeling women can't be bothered with the politics. Like you were saying, like at companies when you felt like you couldn't change. I don't want to get in there. There's too many layers. I can't make a change. I have this feeling that women get to this point where they go, nah, fuck it.
But why, right?
I've just started KK's, come on. I'm freelance. I can think of all of these women I know who would be the perfect getting to that board level, who've all just gone, fuck it, and gone off and created their own businesses, because then they get to do everything they want to do and really make a difference. So
exactly. Do you know what's a funny thing? I've met in the last couple of months, I've met a couple of really, really good, very super passionate engineering managers who are women, but they want to stay as a freelancer and a contractor. So then I go, but you're super passionate. The reason why you want to be an engineering manager is because you want to combine both, you know, the hands-on technical stuff because you love it. You still want to be in that world. At the same time, you feel like mama bear because you want to take care of them, right? That's why you want to do that management role. And surprisingly, they just go, yeah, but when it gets too difficult, I can just walk out, give you 4 weeks notice and not feel like I'm being strung. But you see, you put all these rules and regulation around it. Again, going back to the whole compliance bit, but you're taking so much joy from doing what you really want to do.
Yeah. We need to get back to that, don't we? Find the people that are thrilled to work with you.
But this is what we do here, and that's why I actually quite enjoy, doing this on a daily basis. I've got my own share of challenge, but the fact that every time we get together in a strategy meeting or just like top level leadership meeting, I got distracted with that too.
Please ignore the dog.
But we talk about the diversity of mind and skills and experience rather than like what pants or skirt you wear. And it's so important because everybody is actually on board. So for instance, when we look at, if we go on a group outing and then we take a group photo. Okay, fair enough. We've got a meany amount of women in the company, and then there's a bunch of like male. But then if you emphasize and put a red circle on these are your only female, then you're creating a problem for you to fix. Is it so much more important for people to think that HR is supposed to fix problems that you create yourself, or are they actually coming into your company and make lives better for you? So what we do here is we try to champion the whole lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a passion. It's a skill. It's experience. You've done all these great stuff in your life. How about come and join another bunch of people who are not just smart being together in the same room? Like, you can never be the brightest one, right? But everybody's in the same boat for one vision, which is to try and change the way financial services work. You can be a designer with the same vision. You can be a product manager with the same vision. You can be a HR person with the same vision. It's about changing, right? You're not talking about your Gandhi and you want to save the world from all this despair of like corporate banking and things like that. You do that in a one step at a time. So because of that, even when we get a backlash or a negative feedback about, we have very little women. Well, my only comment is, well, so does HSBC, so does PwC. How about you have a go at them and not have a go at us? Because we're all in the same boat. Again, there's not enough women in tech. Where do you want me to find them?
But you know what? You could have the 50-50 split and those women actually not enjoy working there because it's not an inclusive environment.
Exactly. But because
about that, like, I actually love working in male-dominated environments. Like, give me that any day. There's so much less bitchiness. You know, sorry to all the women I just offended, but there is. You know, they have a problem with you. They have it out. It's done. You know, so it's like, correct. And so I've always found it much more inclusive. So
good point.
And also more
Sorry, no, I just want Audra to read it out because I talk too much in these shows. I try and make it fair and go, oi! But I can tell she's thoroughly enjoying it, not wanting to say a word.
Yeah, I'm just taking it all in because it's honestly really interesting. Yeah. Ben has a good question, though. Do you think that bias, this is interesting, will ever become extinct as attitudes change over time? And excuse the language, all the sexist, not nice people die out.
Yeah.
Everyone else in the comments, that was sexist, racist bastards. But, you know, Audra will. So I don't.
I know. Do you know what? I would have one answer for this. If you continue to think that sexist is a thing, then you're allowing this to continue to be a problem. So I've got my CEO on Twitter a couple weeks ago where he said, how can I help? So there was a comment on Twitter about how there's not enough female speakers on stage. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, if a female speaker wants to do that, they can do so. But I haven't seen much because women naturally don't raise their hand. Well, there's an argument there because sometimes if you don't create a safe space for women, then why the hell are they going to fight for it? Mm-hmm. Again, with the same point about like if going up to directorship means, God, you have to take care of people at home and the board just because you're a woman, because people naturally think that you're going to be mama bear, right? So then why would you do that?
Oh, Sophie ain't doing mama bear. Oh, no. Is there a hashtag? No mama bear?
No mama bear. I would love to have papa bear, so I would take whichever. But whatever works. But this is also one of these things, like why are you deciding to do that and say these kind of things? Like, do all sexist people have to die out? Not really. I think you just need to change the mentality and feel that it's okay. Like it's absolutely okay. Don't pinpoint and make it a problem. If one female person, this is the problem as well. If one female speaker, so you've got 5-5, good split, 50-50, and then two of them decided that I've got other things to do, so I'm not going to come. And then the next thing you know, you found another like 2. So obviously outnumbered, and then it becomes a problem. But why? Everyone's got something to say. Everyone's super passionate about it. There are people who want to learn from a single individual because of like a topic, not because of like who they are. And they're so different. Like Tony Robbins is a male, completely different way of delivering his message. And then there is Tim Ferriss. Example. Yeah, Tim Ferriss is a completely different way of delivering his message. Also another male. Does it mean that I completely block out all the male in my world and then just listen to the female? Well, if there's not enough of them and I ran out of books to read, what am I supposed to do?
It's funny though, you're right, and I think it comes back to the safe space, which thankfully and you'll find this disrupt has, and also I think some of that's the format, because when you get up and the slides and they won't change, you'll have practiced and they'll just suddenly change it. Like, oh my God. I mean, you watch, every speaker has a moment. It's fun, makes it fun. But I'm actually now getting to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I need some men. Oh my God. Like when I'm trying to balance it out, it's actually because it's become the safe space. I think that's a really, really valid point as well. And I do Sophie, out there, but I do think from an organizer point of view, with my organizer hat on, we do need to make more of an effort though to make it fair. I do agree with what you're saying that it does often, people will cancel out, but we just have to, because sometimes they're closed to it.
I'm confused though, because then you were saying, Sophie, you shouldn't have, like, say you were going to do a conference, you were saying you don't want to have a checkbox of all these different things you have to have. So would you just pick people completely based on their topics, or would you think it's important to have those checkboxes?
Yeah. So like for instance, when you run an event, you will ask your audience or like previous audience, what do they want to hear? And then everybody else pitches in, right? Even with or without a photo to determine whether or not they're male or female, then they pitch in and then you pick the best ideas. It's like most of the time you do that. You've got solid data points to prove and justify your decision. And that's a good way of, blocking all of these noise out, because it doesn't matter who you are. It's the same as when you're going through CVs and hiring people. The reason why I say the culture in 11FS is so honest and transparent is you still get the safe space to think that you're great. So for instance, you're a great designer, but the way we work as a best practice and the way 11FS work doesn't work for you. It doesn't mean you're shit at your job. It just means that it's not suited in the way the company wants to operate. So then instead of, telling people that, oh, you're really bad at your job, but that's not really the case. It's just that you didn't quite fit into our best practice. Same thing as how when we're hiring, you're looking for the skill and the experience. So most of the things that we do is to build challenger banks. So we're that challenger consultancy that build challenger banks for traditional banks. So when you want to do that, what's the first thing you want to look for? Someone with a startup experience, right? Because ultimately that's what you fundamentally want to build. So then you want to look for the people with that experience. And if the person, regardless what shape or form they are, and they can deliver that experience and have that experience, and that's why most of the time they say that startups are so cutthroat when it comes to hiring. It's because, well, I really cannot afford at this stage, to bring on passengers. You really need to know what you're coming in for and what you can deliver, because we've told you outright, this is what's expected to be done in a 12-week sprint, for instance, on projects. And because of that, like if you look at not just skills and experience, then what are you really hiring for? And then it's that cultural fit as well. So it all starts from your getting your culture fundamentally right. So if I'm saying that our culture is supportive, cohesive, but there are going to be people who complement each other because some will lack in some, and then the others will have strength that will work together and deliver something. But if you've got a single goal of deliverables, then you know why people are coming in to mix and match and join. It's like mixing a bag of candies, as long as they taste nice. You want something sweet, you pick out everything that tastes nice. It doesn't matter what color, how it feels. If you all close your eyes, they're all going to taste the same. But that's what you ultimately want to aim for. So delivering a project is exactly the same. Delivering a project that is based on a requirement from a client. So we work with our client until we refine and reposition what is it that they want to deliver. Most of the companies, they struggle, right? Because they struggle, and like a consultancy, normally they struggle because the client would dictate what they want. But as a startup and a challenger consultancy, it's when you work with your client together to work out what is it that's actually best for you and best value for you. You might think that you want to build product A, but maybe in between that, product B, C as a mix is actually a better proposition for your product market fit, for instance. So then you go off that. But because you've got a single value vision already that's been born by two groups that got together, then you flow on that effect to your team, your deliverables, hiring for them. Hiring product manager A for project A is never going to be the exact same person or mode for project manager B for project B. Two different requirements. So again, it's the whole, what do you need best to deliver something? I think a lot of times there's work in a consultancy rather than, say, a pure product company. It's because it's not as fluid. It is a one single vision, and it should always be the same vision. And because of that, for instance, when I was at Revolut, then it's a single vision. It's all about the product. So therefore, it's very easy for you to classify people and put them in one single box, which is a product focused box. When you're in a consultancy like this, I've got a lot more freedom to actually work on that, to make sure that you don't particularly put in an effort to say, these are the 4 interview questions you must ask so that you're hiring the right people in this box.
Yeah.
So then you end up putting people in boxes, right? Then the worst is when you go, oh, we don't have time for B, C players. We can only have time for A players. How sad is that? How is that different from being sexist as well? Except you've got 3 categories than 2.
That's true.
Yeah.
So what's Kate asking down the side? Oh, sorry, Audra.
Well, kind of what I was going to say is like, so when you're giving an interview, what do you do to make sure you're not being biased? I know there's a million different theories, but I'm curious what. And
then I've now realized there's a million different more biases than I thought there were as well. Yeah. You're just horrified. You're like, oh, I've always gone for A players. Whoops, I'm being biased for the C players. Oh dear.
So there are a few things that we do in our, say, for instance, our interviewing process. So when it comes to the reviewing of the CVs, there's not much you can do. You go off their experience. So you go off their experience, you go off their level of skills, and then they answer like 3 really tough questions, which is basically going to tell us whether or not this person is going to be at least a 50% fit for what we're looking for, because you can't afford to be like going through every single person and then, you know, have the face-to-face and things like that. So what I then also do is, again, going back to the point, I cannot emphasize this enough, cultural fit is everything for us. So what we then do is, I've got different people from different pockets of the company that are randomly scheduled to come in and do the face-to-face cultural fit interviews with them.
Cool.
That technically means every single soul being in the company has a single responsibility for making sure that they are not making a bad hiring choice. Because it's easy to train a recruiter to hire for skill and experience, because it's proven over time. You can do references, you can look through CVs, you can ask really, like a technical interview, they'll ask you hard questions, give you a technical test. There's no way we are going to hire you if you fail the test. But how do we make sure that you're a human fit for the company as well? Because being human is everything that's needed. Being made of flesh and blood is what you need. And that's also how we interact with our clients. So that's our first core principle. So back to that point.
Can I jump in for one question?
Yeah.
Before we keep going, can you define what you call cultural fit? Because I've heard different definitions, and like,
yes.
And then some people say that people get it mixed up, and it's like you like the same football team, and so I'm just want to
cool.
Let's start with that, and then what you were saying.
Okay, perfect. So I always have the saying that I think a lot of people agree with me. As you're going through a startup into a scale up and then into a corporate, you're going through a growth phase, right? And you then start bringing in different kind of people because your purpose fit has changed, has evolved as well. So your culture then evolves as you continue to grow, and your culture is actually being made up of the people that you bring in. It's not so much of the first 50 people has one type of culture, because you see the way they interact, the way they work together. Is it cohesive, collaborative? All of these jargons are just words that they use to define a culture of a company. It's a working environment. Ultimately, it becomes a lifestyle again. So then as you continue to grow on, again, like I said, you're bringing on people for different kind of purposes. Initially, you wanted a really strong startup CFO. Now you can afford to bring in different kind of people with different kind of backgrounds to support your growth and expansion plans of the company. It's an operating model then, right? It becomes. So because of that, so the culture evolves based on the people that you bring in after. So it continues to evolve. So when you talk about cultural fit, you pick out a few of these really key points. When I have a gun to your head and ask you, what do you think are, instead of asking them, what do you think our culture is? That's why you've got the problem, because everybody's got a different definition. And it's not wrong, because it's their own feeling of what it feels like to work in the environment and what it feels like to be conversing with their colleagues. And that's a good way of defining what your culture is. There's no one single value that tells you this is who we are. It's not. You can be visionaries. You can be super passionate people. You can be the funniest people in a group. But you don't group them. It's just a collaborative group of people that have different kind of mindsets, but then it creates a lifestyle where they come in to work. And that's your culture. So when we look for a cultural fit, that's why what's really important is we get them interviewed by different pockets of people, because everybody has a different perception. If it's just the CEO hiring and doing the final interviews, like most of the interviews in interview process does, then the CEO is hiring the exact same people, the exact same mold. And you cannot beat unconscious bias because of that. There is always that argument, you are partially unconsciously biased anyhow, but the more you blend in and dilute it, the better you're going to get at it.
I love the idea of different types of people from different areas.
Different types of people. So if it's someone that the CEO had never interviewed, but we trust that the person has been around long enough, has been cohesive, immersed, integrated into the company, understands the culture. When you ask them that question, what you feel when you come to work, they properly answer you that question. You know, there's some tangible data points and things like that. Obviously, you do pulse surveys to understand the temperature of the company. And then if they're involved in if the CEO, for instance, the final decision maker, is not involved in the interview process, then the final person will just determine whether or not it's the right pricing fit. Can we or can we not afford this person? Instead of actually saying, oh, do we want this person or not? Because I'm not sure if he's going to be a good fit, but good fit in one person's sense. We rather have it as a collective judgment.
How often do you do those pulse surveys?
So we do a mini one every week to ask
Awesome.
you. Yeah, we do a mini one every week. Like I said, you know, when you're going through hypergrowth, this is what a lot of people like. This is what you really need to realize.
That's so cool.
It's not a myth when they say, you know, 3 months in a startup feels like 3 years in a corporate. If you don't test it on a weekly basis, something along the lines is going to break, and you won't have enough time to chase against it. You'll be chasing your own tail most of the time.
Love it. That's so much better than once a year. Like, it's changed so much. It's
I assume it's very quick. Is it just a couple of questions?
Yes, it's a 5 minutes one asking you how you feel, what do you think has improved, what do you think has not improved, what do you think we should do better, sort of like a mini pulse, but then these are random questions like how do you feel? And sometimes you can add questions like we've got this event, how did you feel it went? So in a way you collect a lot of like feelings.
Yep. Wow. There's a good question here if I could jump in. But I'm going to add my question too. Do you use a vendor or do you do it yourself? But before you answer, this goes along with it, I think. How do you summarize weekly data into a big trend and data for choices in the future?
Yeah, correct. Okay. So this is what I do. I use a blend of tools because they help me. I use Office Vibes, for instance, to do mini 5-minute pulses for weekly. And
that
what I do is cool Office Vibe, yes.
I just love that.
I've never heard of it.
It's such a quick tool, and don't forget, every single tool right now either can be integrated into a certain big one that you usually use as your primary function, or they all have a CSV file, which you can still program and make it into the data points that you want to see. So then using Office Vibe, I do the weekly 5-minute one. And because we run a lot of teams remotely, what I do is I create them in their own group, which technically means on a weekly basis, I can then figure out how each and every group on their own are responding to their environment. So it makes it easy for me on the top to realize, okay, what's going on right and what's not going on right. It's usually on the way back home on a Friday afternoon. I almost say Arvo there. on a Friday.
I know what you meant. You know, by the way, just on that, completely digressing. Sorry, Audra. I was saying Arvo for about 8 years until somebody in the UK pointed out to me that they don't know what I mean. And I'm like, what?
But they're so polite in England, they probably just didn't say.
Like tomorrow Arvo. And I was saying it for forever. Until, like, I honestly, I think it was something like 8 or 9 years.
It's always at the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, no, I just say it anyway. It's so obvious to me. Tomorrow Arvo. Like, it's not morning or evening. Arvo. What else could it be? Anyway, sorry. I just had to share that.
Yes. Oh, that's fine. I know I got sidetracked myself as well. Yes, so Office Vibe for the weekly one to check the pulses of remote teams. And then I do a monthly one using, we use something called 15-5. It's a lot more of a 360 feedback, but then you can also add a few more questions, which basically emphasizes on the things that you really want to know. And then using Office Vibe as well, there is a monthly one that goes out. So I consolidate them into 2 different types. I consolidate them at first time on a weekly basis. So it's fed into a Grow dashboard, which means it's always live. As soon as I pull it up, it's live. And what will happen is every week I get to see how far it moves and how much it's changed. Usually on a weekly basis, it doesn't change too much. I'm a big data freak because I used to be an engineer. You cannot argue with me if you don't have data points to prove otherwise. I'm one of those people.
Note to self, don't have dinner with Sophie.
Don't have data points. I could be influenced under wine. But anyway.
Okay, well, now I know. Good. Yeah, I was thinking that, KK. So Katrina Kevin is the same. And I was thinking that exactly as you said it. I was like, you and KK need to do this. Seriously.
We're going to be BFFs.
Best friends forever.
Oh my God. Yes. So on a weekly basis, I get to see how much they fluctuate, how much they change. Yeah. And then on a quarterly basis, I consolidate them and match them as a chart, comparing it with each other, different colors. Then you straight away see which team is doing better. And because of which team is doing better, then I drop in and parachute in and actually talk to the people. I either do one-to-ones with the managers to understand, okay, so these are the touch points. These are the things that I want to know. Why had this happened and so forth. And because of that, then I start to realize that every single group or like a team are always going to have to build their own culture. And not every culture is going to be a one size fits all. And because of the way we work as well, if I were to say, oh, the mothership feels this way, this is how we work, therefore all of you should work like that. But don't forget, you're talking about people who are currently sitting in South Africa, different mentality, different way of working practice. 5 p.m. they need to go home. Like, don't make them work overtime because that's not the way they were function and programmed. And so because of that, I was able to test out how things work remotely. So in a way, you're using a cultural test to make sure that things go well. But if not, you get to point it out straight away. Is it a stress problem?
Before you've got to that point, because I'm thinking of how often I didn't fill the survey out, you clearly got trust.
So, no. This is every HR challenge. It's not about the yeah. So you have to. This is every HR challenge, right? You have to trust your managers. If you don't empower your managers cannot then have that flow-on effect to their team, because you cannot optimize yourself to look after 200 people, or in this case, 98 people. If you don't trust your managers, then you're not going to get anywhere.
So no, I meant for them to actually fill out the survey, to be honest with their feedback.
So the first time
that it's not going to be negatively coming back on them.
Correct. Good point. So because it's anonymous as well. So what's really important is I never
felt like anonymous was anonymous, so I didn't fill them out.
Of course it's anonymous, except that when you're in a team of 8 people before it grew into 50, you kind of can point it out, right? But the 5 minutes, the 5 minute pulse surveys on a weekly basis are check boxes, 1 to 5 rating. Right. It's not a typing in, because sometimes when you type in, you can kind of tell, I think I know who that person is complaining about the chair and the rollers and things like that. So it is a 1 to 5 rating feeler. And that's what's really important. And it's ranged over like 11 or 12 categories. Really simple. It's a tick, 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 and that's it. But I also had a story to tell. It all starts with a story. When I first joined the company, I said to them, look, I think the world or the industry knows that I've been in a very different place before I came here. Everything wasn't exactly what you've heard out there because I was the head of HR. But there are some good things that I've learned from Revolut. My only intention to come into the company is to not make you feel like Revolut, to make sure that you don't ever feel like in the Revolut. But at the same time, there are good things there that we should learn from, because that's what makes the company really successful. So I had that honest conversation up front, in front of everybody. We were 30 people, and explained to them, this is why I joined the company. Not because, so I had a vision myself. So it was like leading the same pack to make sure that if they weren't bought into my vision, I had to change my mind or walk out of the place before I even start all of these efforts. And because of that, I got the buy-in from the managers, which then when they're growing their team, they understood why these things are important. So ever so often, it's not so much about, going through an onboarding process or your first orientation week. And then you say, oh, by the way, Sophie tells you have to fill out 10 different kind of forms on a weekly basis. And they go, that's a bit overpowering. Why am I doing that?
Yeah. Here's HR again, making us do all this rubbish. So right from the start, you got their buy-in and told them why, they understood. That's awesome.
Yeah, because I was never going to come in.
It's nice to hear HR caring, because I'm typical Gen X and I've been ignored my whole career. So, oh my God, Lee's written a question. How important a role does blockchain play in 11FS's objectives to making banking a truly digital?
Wow.
Yeah, Lee, that's a completely different.
We love the tough questions. We have to get Lee on the show and give him tough questions.
I can tell Lee, you're probably a follower of 11FS as well already. But the way the role blockchain will play in 11FS and making banking truly digital is a completely different context, because we don't actually use blockchain to make banking truly digital. What we do is we built challenger banks for traditional banks to make them truly digital. Because what normally will happen is you will go into a big bank and then there's an innovation lab. Innovation labs are then ran by the same traditional bankers that just wanted to deviate and move into a different, cooler department that suddenly had an injection of a huge amount of investment because the banks are competing with each other. So that's a competition, that it becomes a war of who's got the most investment and how do we change the game. Getting a traditional banker to try and build a challenger bank, not happening, not in this lifetime. Unless the traditional banker is willing to swallow their ego of all these amazing 30, 40 years of experience and then bring in a bunch of people who have actually built a challenger bank before and worked cohesively together and built that bank. So we're a bunch of people who does not take that kind, because we can walk away and do something else. But if it all comes down to the thing, right? It all comes down to that buy-in. If you're not buying into my vision, you commission me to help you become truly digital. But you're not buying into it. You're still dictating it as a typical consultancy. We're not a McKinsey, so we also don't want to fight with a McKinsey because we want to do things differently. It's about coexisting in the world, but how about we play in our own playground while you do something different as well? Like there's more than enough banks out there that are ready to evolve, but there are also more than enough banks out there that are ready to just stay the way they are.
Be interesting to see what happens to them. I'm thinking Blockbuster.
Right.
Just really quickly, Lee has one final question, but we have like 4 minutes left. And I just want to mention that next week we have Mark Hopkins, who is in an agency, and he's talking about, as in a recruitment agency, and he's talking all about embracing video. So make sure you come and join us next week.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
But let's finish with this question. So how do you define what a challenger bank is? I'm still thinking it's Netflix over Blockbuster, but you know. Good question from Lou.
Okay, so not like that. So how do you, I think it first starts off with, it's not about, so a challenger bank isn't a specific set of one single product that delivers one service, okay? Yeah. It is about who your customers are and what you want. So we use a framework which is called Jobs to be Done. Definitely Google into it, look into it. It is the smartest framework to define a proposition and a value in everything you do. It's not just about building a bank. So the biggest question is, banks are currently reinventing. They call it reinventing. They call it reinventing the single point app in your phone. Yeah, and they call it mobile banking because it's on your mobile. Exact same features. You change the UX, you change the UI. That's all about it. Basically, you've just upgraded something existing, but it doesn't impact your lives, right? Because you could have done the exact same thing using the exact same function on your desktop, on a website. Correct. So that's not changing lives. The challenger bank, on the other hand, actually recognizes before they build a product because it's very easy to fail to not build a great product or a great challenger bank. What you would then do is you want to understand what your customers actually really want from you. Are you building something for SME? Are you building something for a individual? So Revolut started off as a traveler, instant forex exchange with no fee.
No fees.
Correct. So that was a good value proposition, right? That was their VP. And why do we call it a challenger bank? It's because, do you actually think that because there's money being wired in and out of an app, therefore you call it a challenger bank? Not really. It has one purpose fit. It was supposed to change your life in the way you transfer money or exchange money. That's a challenger bank. Monzo has a different proposition. Starling has a different proposition. Everyone's here calling themselves a challenger bank is because they have one purpose fit and they're supposed to make life better for you, but they're not supposed to give you a full suite of what the bank is doing. Imagine being a jack of all trades, but a challenger bank is a king of one.
Oh, I like that. That is a perfect note to finish on as well, because it's quite positive. We should all be out there changing the world. I am a challenger trainer. That's what I'm going to call myself going forward. Right. Sophie, that was unbelievably awesome. You must be knackered because you've just shared so much amazing information.
I need to have you back for another one.
You better be a hugger because I'm so giving you a hug on the 25th.
I know.
Yeah, you have to be Australian and hug me. So
I want to see the recording.
Yeah, no, it'll be streamed live. They always are, so definitely you can watch it in live. So thank you. That was a mind-blowing show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you'll come back and see you all soon. We shall see the rest of you next Friday, same time. And thank you very much for being here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. And yes.